In January of 2003, a young couple and their 5-year-old son entered my law office in Nebraska. They claimed to be the parents of John Teeter, a time traveler from the future. Although I've reserved final judgment of their claims, their story and evidence they presented was quite convincing. They told me of a tale about a man who used a time machine to travel from the year 2036 to 1975 and then to 1998, where they first met. For a period of nearly 3 years, this man, claiming to be their young son as an adult, stayed with them in their home. For reasons they are still not clear, in 2001, he borrowed his father's computer and began posting on the internet about who he was and why he was here. This is a compilation of those internet posts he left online. He started in November of 2000, right before the presidential election. After nearly 5 months speaking with people online, he left our time and returned to his home in 2036. When his parents approached me and presented the pictures, documents, notes, and copies of his original posts, they wanted closure. For reasons I cannot explain, they were anxious to leave Florida and rid themselves of the ties to this man who claimed to be their son from the year 2036. Today, you can still go online and read John Teeter's original posts. There are thousands of websites where John Teeter is discussed, and the original people he spoke with are still online. Chapter 1, November 2000. I was about to give up hope that anyone knew who Tipler or Kerr was on this world line. The basics of time travel began at CERN in about a year and end in 2034 with the building of the first time machine. Too bad I cannot post pictures, or I'd show it to you. Is there a site where I don't need to register personal information to post the pictures? I'd be happy to send them to you and answer any questions you may have. I saw the post requesting the basic systems for the gravity distortion system that will allow time travel. Here they are. 1. Magnetic housing units for dual microsingularities. 2. Electron injection manifold to alter mass and gravity of the microsingularities. 3. Cooling and X-ray venting systems. 4. Gravity sensors, VGL system. 5. Main clocks, 4 cesium units. 6. Main computer units, 3. November 4th, 2000. Q. Can you describe time travel for us? The unit has a ramp-up time after the destination coordinates are fed into the computers. An audible alarm and a small light start a short countdown, at which point you should be secured in your seat. The gravity field generated by the unit overtakes you very quickly. You feel a tug towards the unit similar to rising quickly in an elevator, and it continues to rise based on the power settings. At 100% power, the constant pull of gravity can be as high as 2 Gs, or more depending on how close you are to the unit. There are no serious side effects, but I try to avoid eating before a flight. No bright flash of light is seen. Outside, the vehicle appears to accelerate as the light is bent around it. We have to wear sunglasses or close our eyes as this happens due to a short burst of ultraviolet radiation. Personally, I think it looks like you're driving under a rainbow. After that, it appears to fade to black and remains totally black until the unit is turned off. We are advised to keep the windows closed as a great deal of heat builds up outside the car. The gravity field also traps a small air pocket around the car that acts as your only oxygen supply unless you bring compressed air with you. This pocket will only last for a short period, and a carbon dioxide sensor tells you when it's too dangerous. The C204 unit is accurate from 50 to 60 years a jump and travels at about 10 years an hour at 100% power. You do hear a slight hum as the unit operates, and when the power changes or the unit's turned off, there is a great deal of electrical crackling noise from static electricity. Q. Can you tell us any of your memories from 2036? I remember 2036 very clearly. It is difficult to describe 2036 in detail without spending a great deal of time explaining why things are so different. In 2036, I live in Central Florida with my family, and I'm currently stationed at an Army base in Tampa. A world war in 2015 killed nearly 3 billion people. The people that survived grew closer together. Life is centered on the family and then the community. I cannot imagine living even a few hundred miles away from my parents. There is no large industrial complex creating masses of useless food and recreational items. Food and livestock is grown and sold locally. People spend much more time reading and talking together. Religion is taken seriously, and everyone can multiply and divide in their heads. Q. Can you post more of the operations manual for the time machine? I will consider it, but I do not expect they are worth anything to most people except as a curiosity. Q. Can you meet yourself on another world line? What would happen if you did? It has always surprised me why that concept is so hard for people to imagine and accept. Nothing would happen. The universe would not end, and there are no paradox problems that threaten existence. Temporal space-time is made up of every possible quantum state. The Everett Wheeler model is correct. I have met and are seeing myself twice on different world lines. The first was a training mission, and the second is now. I was born in 1998, so the other me is 2 on this world line. There is a saying where I come from: every possible thing that can happen or will happen has already happened somewhere. Q. Describe how your world line is different from ours. For starters, the fact that I am here makes it different. I've also noticed little things like news events that are slightly different. I would guess the temporal difference between this world line and my original is about 1 or 2%. Of course, the longer I am here, the larger that divergence becomes from my point of view. Q. What kind of car is in the picture you posted? It's a 1967 Chevrolet. Q. Can you control time travel with the machine you have? Yes, it can be controlled. However, the distortion unit has operational limits. Imagine your path through time is through a cone. The farther away from the center of the cone, the more difference you will see in the world line. The C204 begins to break away at about 60 years. This means the level of confidence drops rapidly after 60 years of travel, and the world line divergence increases. In other words, if I wanted to go back 2,000 years and meet Christ, there is a good chance I would end up on a world line where he was never born. The computer units and gravity sensors record your trip, and you are able to return to your point of origin. I am aware that research is being done on faster units with more accurate clocks. I imagine they will be able to go back farther with a higher degree of divergence confidence. Q. Does anything on the world line get to you? If you mean mentally, there are many things that bother me here, but being with my parents right now is important to me. Physically, the only thing really wrong is the number of colds I get. Q. Can you return to your home? Yes. Q. Do you have to protect yourself from radiation? I'm not sure what radiation you mean. If you mean from the unit, it vents X-ray and gamma radiation out of the rear. As long as you stay away from that, you should be okay. I keep a radiation detector with me to check my environment and make sure the unit isn't leaking. Q. Can you describe the light you see when the machine is on? It first appears as if you were driving under a tunnel, and then you find yourself in total blackness. Q. Does anyone know where you are? Can you communicate with the future? No, They do not know where I am, and I cannot communicate with them. From their point of view, I will return almost exactly at the same time and moment I left. From their viewpoint, I will only have aged more than expected. Q. Is there anything else to add about what time travel looks like? While the machine is on, everything is black. When the machine is turned off, it is the reverse effect. It appears you are driving out from under a bridge. To tell you the truth, I'm usually sleeping when the unit turns off, but yes, it does appear that the world fades in from black. Q. What's the main technical problem when traveling in time? The hard part of traveling through time is not the bending of gravity, but the plotting of your course and holding to the basic position in your environment. This is done through a system called VGL, Variable Gravity Lock. Basically, the unit takes a reading of the local gravity and samples it during the trip it pulses. If the gravity is too far off, the unit stops or reverses itself to the last sample period where the readings were correct. If there is some sort of failure, the unit shuts down and drops out to whenever you may be. Q. Are there any effects from the machine on the environment when you use it? The only real physical trace is a large chunk of ground missing from the point of origin and a large pile of dirt at the destination. The gravity field surrounds a small portion of the earth under you and takes it along for the ride. There is really no way around this. I would quite say it scoops up the ground cleanly. It sort of vibrates it loose and takes it along for the ride. It looks like someone raked the ground an inch or so deep with a small hand hoe or shovel. November 6th, 2000. Perhaps it's a bit easier to understand why time travelers do not reveal themselves. Yes, you can travel forward in time. I first saw the car in 2036. The idea was to find a vehicle that would not draw attention for that time period. Unfortunately, there were not very many suitable vehicles around in 2036, and I sold the car when I arrived in 2000. You do not rewrite history. I can only affect what happens here just as easily as you can. Why do people in this time period worry so much about time travelers destroying their world line when they have no problem doing it themselves every day? My goal is not to be believed. Most people do not take news of the war very well, but I find that everyone believes it's inevitable. Even in your own history, are not great inventions and discoveries made during a time of war in your effort to kill and maim in a new and more efficient way? No, I do not work for any large industrial electronics company or any other company. Are stock tips really the first thing you want to know about in the future? As a representative of your time period, do you realize what that says about you? You should probably know that this time is not remembered for its selflessness, charity, or ability to work together. Why would I want to talk to you? Don't you believe you have something interesting or worthwhile to say to someone in the future? No, the ice caps are not melting any faster than they are now. There is far less smog and industrial waste in 2036. You asked about the North Polar Ice Pack. I never said the environment wasn't a problem. Doesn't water expand when it freezes? If the polar ice caps melted, wouldn't sea levels go down? I don't know if there's enough ice for this to make a difference, and I'm not an expert on global warming. Yes, I realize people become hostile. I don't expect anyone to believe me, and I have nothing to sell. I take no offense by it, just out of curiosity. If you were a time traveler, what do you think it would take to get people to believe you? I suppose we could agree that no particular era in history is famous for its development of humanity, but just once, I would like to hear a question like, what is family like in the future? How does society deal with poverty? Is AIDS, abortion, and drug use still a problem? Why don't I give you a stock tip? The money you make would dilute the intelligence and forethought that a smart person had in picking the stock all by themselves. If I told you how to get rich, I would be taking money from them and giving it to you. Getting back to my proper universe is tricky but possible. Yes, another jump would take me to a different family. When traveling to other world lines, there is a system of clocks and gravity sensors in the machine that sample the environment before dropping out. It's called VGL. If a cement block were there, the machine would backtrack until it sensed relative congruity to the original gravity sample. A great deal of time and effort goes into picking just the right spot, since relative to the Earth, you cannot physically move during a displacement. Please, keep in mind a couple of points as I answer your questions. First, I am not a physicist. Time travel is only a tool that allowed me to do my job in 1975. Most airline pilots are probably not aerospace engineers. Second, let me give you an example of our position. Imagine you live in the year 1900 and a time traveler attempts to explain how a jet engine works. Even though the invention of the airplane is only a decade in the future, he would have to find some frame of reference to explain the basics of flight. Then he would have to outline the mechanics of how the engine works. As amazing as it would sound, the jet would be invented about 30 years later. Time travel is achieved by altering gravity. The concept is already proven by atomic clock experiments. The closer an observer is to a gravity source of high mass, the slower time passes for them. Traveling at high speeds mimics this effect, which equals the twin paradox of faster-than-light travel. However, this type of gravity manipulation is not sufficient to alter your world line. The basic math to alter world lines exists right now. Tipler first described a working time machine through his theory of massive rotating cylinders. Certain types of black holes also exhibit the time travel abilities of Tipler cylinders. Roy Kerr was one of the first to describe the dual event horizons of a rotating black hole. As with Tipler cylinders, it was possible to travel on a time-like trip through a Kerr black hole and end up in a different world line without being squished by the gravity of the singularity. The mass and gravitational field of a microsingularity can then be manipulated by injecting electrons onto its surface. By rotating two electric microsingularities at high speed, it is possible to create and modify a local gravity sinusoid that replicates the effect of a Kerr black hole. For those asking, how come a microsingularity doesn't swallow the Earth, or want to know details about the size, stability, mass, temperature, and resulting Hawking's radiation for such a thing, though those details I must keep to myself. Yes, you can travel into the future, and it takes less energy than going into the past. The computer system is connected to the unit through an electrical bus. There are actually 3 computers linked together that take the same signals from the gravity sensors and clocks. They use a Borda error correcting protocol that checks the integrity of the data and trips the VGL system. I am not aware of any physical change to my DNA or aura. I do, however, seem to be more susceptible to colds. Yes, you will remember me if you want to. World lines do not change that way, and I will only become an insignificant part of your history. November 7th, 2000. I would equate the future distortion units to current jet engines. The first one worked great, but they can always make it better. The C204 unit used 4 cesium clocks. The C206 uses 6 cesium clocks. But they use an optical system to check the oscillation frequency. This makes the world line divergence confidence much higher. Yes, I believe in Jesus Christ and we pray to God in churches. There are some differences you may be interested in. Religion is a major part of people's life in 2036. Pain and change tend to bring people together and closer to God. However, religion is far more personal than it is now. There are no huge centralized religions and people talk openly about their beliefs. It might also interest you to know that the day of worship is Saturday, the day God meant to be the Sabbath day, and the 10 Commandments have been restored to the 10 that God gave us. Life is much more rural in the future, but high technology is used to communicate and travel. People raise a great deal of their own food and do much more farm work. Yes, compared to now, we do work long hours. After the war, my father made a living selling oranges up and down the west coast of Florida. My closest friends raised horses and another works for a company that maintains wireless internet nodes. Life has changed so much over my lifetime that it's hard to pin down a normal day. When I was 13, I was a soldier. As a teenager, I helped my dad haul cargo. I went to college when I was 31 and I was recruited to time travel shortly after that. Again, I suppose an average day in 2036 is like an average day on the farm. Yes, there is a post office. The internet is still alive and well in the future. People spend much more time talking because life is more centered on the community. I've noticed the same effect here when the power goes off. People tend to come out of their homes and actually spend time with their neighbors. There is a lot more personal trust and less paranoia. When I'm with my parents, I live in a community made up of tree houses on a large river in Florida. The river floods sometimes and we have access to the Gulf. Most of our neighbors make a living off the sea or in moving cargo by boat. There is a civil war in the United States that starts in 2005. That conflict flares up and down for 10 years. In 2015, Russia launches a nuclear strike against the major cities in the United States, which is the other side of the Civil War from my perspective. Against China and Europe, the United States counterattacks. The U.S. cities are destroyed along with the AFE, the American Federal Empire, aka Deep State. Thus, we in the country won. The European Union and China were also destroyed. Russia is now our largest trading partner, and the capital of the U.S. was moved to Omaha, Nebraska. No new information there on UFOs and aliens. I also find that an interesting subject. Personally, I think UFOs might be time travelers with very sophisticated distortion units. One of the biggest reasons food production is localized is because the environment is affected with disease and radiation. We are making huge strides in getting it cleaned up. Water is produced on a community level, and we do not eat meat that we raise ourselves. Yes, genetic engineering is used, but it's like any other technology. It can be good and bad. One thing we did not do was manufacture more hybrid seeds. What are you people thinking? I am a Christian agnostic. I do not believe faith alone is enough to get us back to God. I'm not sure what happens when we die, but I'm pretty sure it's not a walk in the park. Space travel? We are working on it. Q. What future technologies can you tell us about? I hesitate to answer, but I'll give a bit. Hydrogen fuel cells are more efficient solar cells and big deals. Computer technology and software get much better. My greatest joy is sailing. For fun, I enjoy swimming, playing cards, reading, playing games on the net, and talking with people who live in other countries. As a community, we celebrate much more and have bonfires and dances. My hobby is sorting through old magazines and video of life before the war. After the war, early new communities gathered around the current universities. That's where the libraries were. I went to school at Fort UF, which is now called the University of Florida. Not too much is different except the military is a large part of people's lives, and we spend a great deal of time in the field and farms at the university or fort. Most of my memories growing up are not fond. Life was very hard. Simple things made me happy, like hugging my mother and father. Yes, we have cameras, more digital. Film is used like painting is today. No hologram cameras, though. Yes, we have phones, but the service is through the web. Most power generation is localized. It amazes me how much power is wasted now. Yes, solar is big. There is thought that a singularity generator could also be used, but most people are against it. The elderly are highly revered and looked after on a community level. So are orphans. There are always something people can do, no matter what. The idea of avoiding work is looked down upon. Everyone pulls together to keep the community strong. Hats are more common in the future, and flashy colors are less common. Dress is much more functional, and we dress up whenever we get a chance. I have noticed that no one in this time dresses for occasions, even when they have the clothes. Why do people wear shorts to church? We do not spend nearly the amount of time on our hair as people do now. Women like to wear their hair longer, and men have it much shorter. Both sexes shave it all off when they're in active military service. There is far less medical treatment in the future. People die when they know it's time to die. No lasers. Genetic machines and cloning organs are the new techs in the future. The Constitution was changed after the war. We have 5 presidents that are voted in and out on different term periods. The vice president is the president of the Senate, and they are voted in separately. We have cars, just not a whole bunch of them. There is public transportation from city to city. If I could bring some material thing back to your time from 2036, it would be a copy of the new U.S. Constitution. Yes, you can travel to the future that was 0.05 seconds ahead of now, but not with my machine. The C204 uses the second as the basic unit of measure. This C206 may be capable of 0.05 seconds. Q. If you arrived a fraction of a second in the past or future on another world line, would we even know that you arrived? No, you would not. But the you on the world line would. It is believed there is some sort of measurable quantum difference in world lines. I am not an expert on that, so I can offer little information. You would be welcome in my home. November 8th, 2000. Q. What is the purpose of time travel is on your world line? In 2036, a great deal of effort is going into repairing our environment. I was sent to 1975 to get a computer system and take it back to 2036. Time travel is not a secret in 2036, and I expect it will become more common. Q. Why is time travel used? Right now, it's used to get information or items that would be helpful in getting a post-World War III world back to normal conditions. There are 7 other time travelers in my unit. Q. Where do time travelers go? Right now, most of our practical missions are from 1960 to 1980. There is a great deal of research into later and future periods, but the farther you go, the lower the divergence confidence of the world line. Q. Are all the time machines you know about being used? Yes. Q. What type of vehicle will you use to go back since you sold the other car? I have a 1987 four-wheel drive. The vehicle needs a strong suspension system to handle the weight of the distortion unit. Q. Are you able to take other people back with you when you leave? Yes. November 11th, 2000. Q. When you change cars, do you readjust the time machine? Yes, but it's a function of the VGL system. A gravity baseline is taken and rechecked every time the unit is used. A new vehicle would alter the gravity signature. Q. How is the singularity maintained? I am not a physicist, so I cannot answer that to your level of sophistication. The singularities are held in an enclosed magnetic field. Q. Can you travel between other dimensions with the time machine? No. However, the longer the unit is on past a safe divergence confidence, the stranger the world line becomes. The unit I have is safe to about 1% for every 60 years at max power. Q. If your time machine is accurate to the second, then how do you choose the moment you arrive? My goal was to reach a certain date and time, which is converted into seconds from the computer to make its calculations. I do not pick the second. It's more important to have a low divergence confidence number. Q. Are you here to observe the presidential elections? I would use the word elections a bit cautiously. Perhaps it's easier now to see a civil war in your future. Q. Why are you posting on a message board? I think you're committing treason. Why would it be treason? Q. If your time machine travels at 10 years an hour, it would take you more than 3 hours to get to 2000. How can the air in your vehicle last that long? Yes, that's about right, but my initial trip was to 1975, not 2000. I guess it's a question of how many technical details you really want or feel I'm making up. We do take additional oxygen, and the air pocket is a bit larger than you might think. November 12th, 2000. Q. Have you considered that someone may find you or try to injure you to get your time machine? Don't you care about the changes you're causing on our world line? Yes, I have considered it, but it's very easy to remain hidden behind a veil of disbelief. The people who understand what they are seeing are not aggressive. Everyone else just finds them entertaining. The obvious first answer is that the only world line of consequence is my own, and I don't care what happens here. That, however, is not the case. I have shown these documents in order that people might consider the possibility. I do not expect people to believe them. Q. Why are you posting these top secret restricted government documents here? The restricted nature of the documents I posted refers to the departmentalized nature of the technical information. The manual is supposed to remain with the unit. The current F-16 fighter jet probably has an operations manual. All the information is in it, not secret, but no one wants it to walk away from the plane. Q. Why are you here? I am here for personal reasons. For a few months now, I have been trying to alert anyone that would listen to the possibility of a civil war in the United States in 2005. Does that seem more likely now? Actually, it's quite amazing to see what's happening. I have been trying to get people to pay attention for the last few months, but to see it unfold is very interesting. Before I leave, I'll try and post my report. I am curious. Will anyone be upset if Florida voters are not counted in the Electoral College because of the current confusion? Q. Do you think about the possible outcome of your actions here? Yes. November 15th, 2000. A broken clock tells the right time twice a day. Q. The car in your picture looks brand new. Thanks. I sold it when I arrived here. It attracted a great deal of attention. Perhaps that's why it was still around in 2036. Q. You sound like you're in the Army. More or less correct. Q. Your superiors must have larger time machines that can find you with. Why would they come looking for me? I'm expected back, but I will only have been gone a few seconds from their point of view. Q. Don't you worry that our government will find you and take your time machine? Stupidity and greed are fairly predictable for a period of time. Q. If you're telling the truth, the last thing you should be doing is talking about it. I don't see any value in what you're saying. Have you considered that your society might be better off if half of you were dead? Q. Why don't you tell us how to get rich in the stock market before you go? I'm thinking about it. I'm waiting for my family to buy up all the good stuff cheap first. Joke. Q. In order for me to believe you fully, I need a prediction that comes true right now, so give me one. I appreciate the position you are in, but you must realize that I am not affected in the least if you believe me or not. Q. Who wins the upcoming sporting event? Off the top of my head, can you tell me if it rained in Atlanta this time last year? Do you think time travelers carry a sports reference with them? Q. Tell me anything that comes true now, and I will believe you forever. It is a mistake to give anyone your unwavering belief, but you will find that out yourself in 2005. Q. Can anyone use the time machine? Does it have a key? The unit has 2 security systems to protect it from most people. 1, it has a code that must be entered correctly. Second, and probably more effective now, the unit cannot be used by anyone who can't add and subtract. Q. Why did you go to 1975? The first leg of my trip was from 2036 to 1975. After 2 VGL checks, the divergence was estimated about 2.5% from my 2036. I was sent to get an IBM computer system called the 5100. It was one of the first portable computers made, and it has the ability to read the older IBM programming language in addition to APL and BASIC. We need the system to debug various legacy computer programs in 2036. Unix has a problem in 2038. November 17th, 2000. It is thought that being close to a gravitational field has a biological effect on all matter, including cells. The effect is to slow the movement of the electrons in the orbit of their nucleus, which slows the mechanical and biological functions of an observer close to the gravity. Thus, the pausing of time is a local phenomenon depending on how close you are to a gravitational source. This is one example of a theory involving time shells, progressing in size and intensity around a gravitational point from all matter. The more massive the object, the larger and more influential the time shells around it, like an onion. Another offshoot of this theory is that kinetic energy is actually the conversion of stored energy in the atom as it passes through time shells in a gravitational field. November 20th, 2000. Q. If you sold your car, how will you go back? The unit is portable between vehicles. It is very heavy and requires a stiff suspension. The unit is currently in a 4-wheel drive. Q. How did you solve the problem of living in this time? I am currently living with my parents on this world line. They know exactly who I am and how I got here. Q. How did you get access to a computer? There are numerous ways to do that. Any local printing shop allows you access to a computer system. Q. With all the things you could be doing, why are you trying to find out about us on the internet? What suggestions do you have? Q. It seems like it would be hard fit in on this timeline. You don't think you could blend into 1970? What difficulties would you expect to have that couldn't be overcome? Q. A lot of people think you are crazy. I have nothing to sell, nor do I want anyone to believe in me or take some action other than people think of me does not affect me in the least. Q. What would happen if someone built a time machine based on your information? What you do on your world line is your own business. I can't think of any better way to start a war than for someone to figure out how to make a time machine. Go for it. Q. I want straight answers to my questions. I will be happy to answer almost any question you have. November 21st, 2000. All of your questions asked have been answered in one way or another. You assume I am here to start a war. Consider this. You are a time traveler who wishes to go back in time to 1941 because your grandparents live close to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. You realize you can't stop the war, but you may be able to help them prepare for it. Strangely, December 7th comes and goes with no sneak attack. As the war in Europe rages on, Japan fails to join the Axis powers. There is no war in the Pacific, and the United States remains neutral. Then you watch as Germany begins to develop the atomic bomb, all by themselves. For a change, I have a question for all of you. I want you to think very hard. What major disaster was expected and prepared for in the last year and a half that never happened? As far as war goes, I have faith you are quite capable of starting one all by yourselves. I am hard-pressed to accept any criticism on my outlook on that subject. Growing up might have been a vastly different experience for me than it was for most of you. Personal responsibility, determination, honor, friendship, and self-reliance are not just words. We live in a world recovering from years of war, poison, destruction, and hate. Excuse me. As far as war goes, I have faith you are quite capable of starting one all by yourself. I am hard-pressed to accept any criticism on my outlook on the subject. Growing up might have been a vastly different experience for me than it was for most of you. Personal responsibility, determination, honor, friendship, and self-reliance are not just words we try to live up to or fantasize about. On my world line, life is not easy. We live in a world recovering from years of war, poison, destruction, and hate. All of it courtesy of the thinking and actions of people that live right now in the same world you do, worrying about which stocks to buy or whether or not a stranger is lying to them on the internet. I believe that hardship and challenge develop character and community. My first experience with war came when I joined a shotgun infantry unit at the age of 13. In the 4 years I served as a rebel, I watched hundreds of people get shot, burn, and bleed to death. I know exactly where I was and every detail of the exact moment the first nuclear warheads began falling on Jacksonville. I know the pain and regret of not acting soon enough to enjoy a relationship as a loved one dies of or from a war that gained nothing. How can you possibly criticize me for any conflict that comes to you? I watch every day what you are doing as a society. While you sit by and watch your constitution being torn away from you, you willfully eat poisoned food, buy manufactured products no one needs, and turns an uncaring eye away from millions of people suffering and dying all around you. Is this the universal law you subscribe to? Perhaps I should let you all in on a little secret. No one likes you in the future. This time period is looked at as being full of lazy, self-centered, civically ignorant sheep. Perhaps you should be less concerned about me and more concerned about that. There have been a great many questions piling up that I do plan to get to. If anyone sees a question I have answered before, please feel free to repeat the answer. I do not plan on leaving this world line for a while yet. I very much enjoy spending time with my family. November 22nd, 2000. John Teeter, Part 2. December 6, 2000. Q. What is music like in the future? Most of the same music you enjoy is available on archive. However, the days of megastars playing multiple track music and lip syncing on a huge stage are pretty much isolated to your time period. Like everything else, music is much less centralized. The general trend is away from computer-generated music and more towards real people playing real instruments. Music is much more of a personal experience. More people know how to read music and play together in small groups. Q. What is the entertainment industry like in the future? Again, entertainment is less centralized. There are movies and TV, but everything is distributed over the net, and more people produce their own shows. Q. Could you travel in time to escape your original world line? Would you be looked down on? I suppose that would work if you were trying to escape a natural disaster, but you must consider that trying to escape by time traveling has its own problems. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by being looked down on. Q. Is there a world government in place by the year 2011? On my world line in 2011, the United States is in the middle of a civil war that has dramatic effects on most of the other Western governments. Q. Earlier, you said something was wrong with Unix on your world line. What's wrong with it? Yes, and with yours too. I have to believe that there must be a Unix expert out there someplace that can confirm that. I'm not exactly sure what the technical issue is, but I believe some sort of Unix system registry stops in 2038. Q. Does the conflict between Arabs and Jews have anything to do with the war you describe? Yes. Q. When you first started posting, did anyone believe you? I don't know if anyone believes me now. You must realize that I don't expect anyone to believe me, nor does it affect me one way or the other. I enjoy these conversations. What would you expect a time traveler to say or do in your time? Q. How do the singularities keep from overheating in your time machine? Very highly technical cooling stuff. Q. How far have computers and softwares progressed in the future? I would say the biggest difference is the reliability of the hardware and software. It absolutely amazes me how willing people are here to accept computer and software failures on such a regular basis. I was very surprised to see how common it is. You can look forward to very stringent manufacturing parameters and programming discipline. Think back to the early days of the computer and how much work and cleverness it took to fit those programs into such small areas of memory. Has more and cheaper memory brought better programs or just more programs? As far as technical specifics, I'm afraid I can't go into so much detail. However, I will try and tell you that processing speed and memory size take dramatic leaps forward. Q. Please explain how magnetic fields and tachyons are involved with your machine. I'm afraid my notebook on Maxwell's equations isn't with me, and I must say again that I am not a physicist. As far as tachyons go, it is my understanding that they cannot exist at all unless they are created and traveling faster than light. As far as time travel goes, I'm afraid tachyons are merely useful for describing various quirky effects of strange matter. I will post again as soon as I get a chance. December 10th, 2000. I will try to answer all your questions. However, I have noticed that there seems to be a difficulty in entertaining a conversation in the middle. Most of the following questions I have answered at length in previous posts. I understand how important it is to you to have these answers when new people read portions of the postings, but I find it tiring to keep repeating myself. Any suggestions would be appreciated. Q. Who won the Super Bowl in 2001? I do not answer questions like this. Although I don't really know the motivation for the question, I can guess. If a time traveler had knowledge of your future and you can only ask one question, would this be it? Besides, can you tell me if it rained in New York on June 4th, 1932? You are from the future, so you should know that. Q. How can you travel in time since the Earth changes position? How do you avoid physical objects at your destination? How can you breathe? This is actually a very good question, and parts and pieces of the answer are scattered in previous postings. I am often surprised it is not the first one asked. You are correct. The problem is actually the most difficult part of time travel. Although some of your assumptions about matter displacement are a bit off, the problem is real. Inside the displacement unit are a series of very sensitive clocks and gravity sensors. This system is called the VGL, Variable Gravity Lock. In simple terms, before the unit leaves a world line, it takes a base reading of the local gravity and adjusts the Tipler sinusoid to lock into that position. Although the temporal physics of this statement are wrong, in effect, it holds you to the Earth during travel. It periodically checks to see that the field has not varied. If it does, it stops and reverses course or drops out at that point. Buildings and other terrain features are avoided in the same way. Yes, we do bring oxygen in the vehicle with us, but we do not lose atmospheric pressure. Q. If the time machine was on for a split second and then returned, wouldn't it appear someplace far off in space? Please see VGL system above. Also, please be aware that from the viewpoint of the time traveler, the displacement unit actually left and then returned. The viewer does not experience this. Think of it as a go substatement in a computer program. Q. What type of money do you use in the future? It's not very different than it is now. Yes, we have money and credit cards. However, like everything else, the monetary system is decentralized. Banking is based mostly around the community structure. There are no multinational banking or computerized economic systems. There are also no income taxes. Q. Are radio location systems still used on livestock? Some of the larger farm communities use electronic markers and fences. I'm not a farmer, so I don't have much detail about that. Q. Is the GPS system still used in the future? Oh yes. In fact, the unit I have with me works here. I'm not sure why that surprises me. There are also a great many communications and internet satellite systems. Q. Do you still use the American flag? What does it look like in the future? Yes, we still have the flag. There is a debate about changing it from 50 stars to 5. Q. Do any states have new names? Not that I can think of. I am aware that some smaller towns changed their names after the war, and most universities have the word fort before them on my world line. Q. How much training is required before you can time travel? Can you make any repairs to your time machine? I started training on the recommendation of my PS officer when I got out of school in 34. I graduated in March of 35. Actual hands-on training started soon after that, and I left in April of 2036. No, there are not very many repairs I can make to the unit. The unit is built very well, but the tolerances are very small. I could probably repair the electrical system, and it will accept inputs from older computers. Q. Is it still safe to fish in the future? Yes, we can fish. There are some areas that are still too dangerous, so we don't fish in those areas. Q. Have any time travelers come to your world line in 2036? Not that I'm aware of, but I accept the possibility. Q. Is there public transportation in the future? A high-speed train system connects the larger cities. Roads are still used for cars, and many people ride horses and bikes. Q. What items will you take back with you? Books. I'm also taking copies of family photos that were lost during the war. Q. How long have you been here? That I must keep to myself right now. Q. Don't you worry about the government finding you? Not really. In order to find me, they would have to believe time travel is possible. Q. Are you taking any pictures and videos? Oh, yes. Q. Can you give us any details on natural disasters and temperatures in the future? That's one area I've decided not to talk about, sorry. The average temperature worldwide is a bit cooler. Q. Are any other time travelers from the future with you now? No. They're off doing something else, I'm sure. Q. Is time travel discussed on the web in the future? Do you recognize any websites now from the future? Time travel is a major part of social discussion. I'd have to check when I get back. Most of the larger servers that were in the major cities were lost or destroyed. Q. Is there any strange connection between you and the John Teeter that was here on this world line before you? What do your parents tell him about you? He calls me uncle. Yes, there is a connection. He feels like a younger brother. Sometimes I get mixed emotions watching him and I realize I'm watching the origins of my personality. I tend to playfully criticize my father about that. December 13th, 2000. Well, it looks like the election is almost over. I have been quite busy in the last few days and I appreciate everyone's patience. I should be thanking you for listening. Even if everything I have said before means nothing, I expect it has at least been entertaining. I went through the postings looking for questions I have not addressed yet. I hope I got to all of them. I get my email remotely through about 3 different systems, and I use one of your handheld computer units to write with. In a few days, I would like to send Pamela a list of questions on my own. As you know, one of my areas of expertise is in history, and the information I have gathered has been invaluable. Although I am not leaving right away, I would like to include some of your thoughts in my report. Q. Is it possible for someone who reads this to invent time travel? When John leaves, as one will remember him, no one will remember him, and this will all be forgotten. This statement is quite insightful. One of the reasons I have been communicating this way is so that others who I have directed here can see some of the information I have shared with you. Q. Won't a small divergence between world lines cause everything to look different as compared to your world line? The divergence measurement refers to the local gravitational field compared to the point of origin. It is merely an empirical indicator of overall change in a world line. Some things that are quite different on one world line have very little effect as time passes, and the other world lines appear to converge again and look very similar. World lines changes are not exponential. They act more like chaotic attractors with varying effects depending on the size and location. Q. If multiple world theory is correct and there are 2 of you, one of you has to be the real one. I find it unsettling that you look at us as representatives of the people from the past. One reason I think you may be a time traveler is because I don't understand or relate to you at all. You are correct. This world line is not mine, but it looks very similar. It may be compared to reading 2 books that are the same. I can jump back and forth between them and still see the same story. I do not consider you true representatives of my world line, but I do know something of how the story ends. In consideration of Everett Wheeler, the reason we don't know if Schrodinger's cat is dead is because it might have had a time machine. Q. I think Russia is very likely to attack the United States. It's hard to imagine being here to see it. You were also correct, but I want to add a twist to your thinking. Russia's enemy is the United States government, not you, the average person. Q. If this world line is 2% divergent from your world line, how do you get home? If you go forward from here, won't the divergence approach infinity? Yes, this is true. If I go forward on this world line, the future will not be my future. I get home by going back to 1975 before I arrived and then going forward to 2036. Your deductions are quite accurate. It's possible to go forward to your 2036 and it would look nothing like mine. Q. I have an old working IBM computer. Maybe I should stash it away for 30 years and see what happens. Toss it. The 5100 is the interesting machine. Q. Does the current relationships between Arabs and Jews have anything to do with the coming war? Real disruptions in world events began with the destabilization of the West as a result of degrading U.S. foreign policy and consistency. This becomes apparent around 2004 as civil unrest develops near the next presidential election. The Jewish population in Israel is not prepared for a true offensive war. They are prepared for the ultimate defense. Wavering Western support for Israel is what gives Israel's neighbors the confidence to attack. The last resort for the defensive Israel and its offensive Arab neighbors is to use weapons of mass destruction. In the grand scheme of things, the war in the Middle East is part of what's to come, not the cause. Q. What can you tell us about atoms that seem to be linked at a distance? Perhaps you could describe what you mean. It appears to be space travel or the effect of similar atomic particles that seems to be related over great distances. Again, please forgive my ignorance. I am not a trained physicist. Q. Does anything happen in the year 2012? Will the world end? In my 2012, I was 14 years old, spending most of my time living, running, and hiding in the woods and rivers of Central Florida. The Civil War was in the 7th year, and the World War III was 3 years away. Yes, there are unusual events in 2012, but they do not cause the world to end. Unfortunately, I have decided not to discuss events that you or I can do nothing about. It is important that they be a surprise. Perhaps you are familiar with the story of the Red Sea and the Egyptians? Q. What can you tell us about various paranormal conspiracy theories and weather control in the future? I must admit I am unfamiliar with most of what you have asked here. I am aware of the HARP system, but I don't know how that would control the weather with it. Q. Please describe any details you can about the education system in the future. The education system has been through many changes. School in 2036 is no longer a political indoctrination system, and students learn how to learn. Since community activity varies from place to place, the emphasis on basic reading, math, and language is augmented with skills particular to the community. One school may emphasize farming, while another teaches woodworking. Having children is a bit different and less common in 2036. A typical school day involves a setting very much like it was 100 years ago, with smaller classes and few administrators to teachers. Other areas of study that are more common now are history, citizenship, and personal economics. Q. Do the Arabs and Jews become entangled in the Civil War of the USA? They are not directly involved, but political situations are dependent on Western stability, which collapses in 2005. Q. The Arab countries appear to have weapons of mass destruction. Do they use them? Not against America, but they are used against each other. Q. Please post a picture of money used in the future. That would be more impressive than your time machine pictures. I am disappointed that you feel I am trying to impress you. Why would I bring money from 2036 with me? Isn't that something that could easily be faked? Now, if I told you I was your cousin's brother and I knew about the scar on your left leg, that would convince you. Before you leave, you could videotape your departure and get it to us. That is an interesting idea. I will look into how to do that. 1. According to the Constitution, what do you think has the final word on choosing a president and why? 2. Do you think the Electoral College should be continued? 3. Why do you think the Bill of Rights was written? 4. What is your opinion on the Second Amendment to the Bill of Rights? 5. Does anyone know what industry is the largest U.S. political contributor? 6. Does anyone know who owns the majority of the solar power research and development companies? 7. Imagine you had all the money and power you desire. What do you see yourself doing? 8. What is the longest distance you ever ran and or walked at one time without stopping? 9. What is the longest period of time you went without food? 10. Do you know what cholera is and how to avoid getting it? December 21st, 2000. Very interesting argument, but I have a couple of questions. You described the word paradox as it refers to the idea of the existence of a problem that has no solution. Actually, the number one definition I read in the American Heritage Dictionary is a seemingly contradictory statement that may nonetheless be true. Also, what exactly is your definition of time travel? I was taught that time travel is strictly a local observation that can only be measured by the experience of an individual or single particle. Under that definition, the twin paradox of time dilation due to acceleration or gravity, and even sleeping can be considered time travel. You appear to be arguing against dematerialization and or space-like trips under the limits of special relativity in a single world line. I do agree that the grandfather paradox is not possible simply because the classic problem is presented as an observer's issue magnified to a universal issue. Your statement about observations are correct when you isolate the experiences to a single world line. However, the reason there are no paradoxes is because the universe doesn't care how we react to its handiwork. In a universe made up of infinite world lines, or the superuniverse, everything is possible and has 100% probability, therefore, no paradoxes. Q. Where do you think all the water came from in the Great Flood stories? I believe the explanation for the Great Flood stories originated with the changes that occurred near the Mediterranean at the end of the last ice age. Even on this world line, there is a great deal of evidence to support the fact that sea levels did change radically in isolated areas worldwide. I also heard someplace that if the ice mass on Antarctica melted today, sea level worldwide would rise about 100 feet. I'm not exactly sure that's true. Peace to you also. 30th of December 2000. Greetings and happy holidays, everyone. I am very surprised and delighted to see the conversations going in the direction it has on this thread. Unknowingly, you all have stepped into the real mystery of time travel that remains speculative in 2036. Based on a couple of questions I see here, I will try my hardest to describe what we in 2036 think space-time looks like and how it behaves. Please keep in mind that I realize how easy it is to dismiss what I say. First, I'm trying to do this from memory. Imagine you were back in 1911 trying to explain a jet engine to the Wright brothers. However, there are some very basic properties of quantum theory that support this model today. I appreciate the fact that you are reading this with an open mind. Q. If parallel universes do exist, did they start at the same time? It is thought that the event called the Big Bang was the start of not only this world line or universe, but all world lines and all universes that make up the superuniverse. It is also thought that the superuniverse can be imagined as an expanding sphere with the Big Bang in the center. Individual world lines, or timelines, can be imagined as lines originating at the center and trending toward spiraling around the sphere until they reach the edge. The individual world lines expand in length and widen as you follow them from the center. Each individual moment or event on a world line has infinite possibilities or outcomes. Imagine this as a single point with infinite lines shooting away from it, which in turn are made up of points with their own possibilities and outcomes. Now remember, these individual world lines with all these points and possibilities are defined by their ability to hold their inhabitants in time-like trips only, which is no faster than light travel. Now consider the reality of a spinning or electrified black hole Kerr. Penrose diagrams of these oddities show mathematically that you can make simulated space-like trips, which are faster than light, through the singularity without being destroyed. In order to do this without wiping out most modern physical laws, you must travel to an alternate world line or universe. Therefore, if multiple world lines exist, infinite world lines exist. I'm trying to imagine a superuniverse with infinite possibilities and world lines. I think of a room with mirrors on all the walls. You are aware of your captivity, But as you look into the distance, you see an infinite number of yous and an infinite number of mirrored rooms. The gravity distortion machine allows you to step out of your room and into another next to you. The closer you are to your original room, the closer it looks like yours. The farther away, the stranger it looks to you. Q. John said, if I go forward on your world line, the future will not be my future. I go home by going back to 1975 before I arrived and then going forward to 2036. A few people have asked me about this statement, so I will try to clarify it. On my world line, A, in 2036, I was given a mission to 1975. I turn my machine on and I jump to another world line, B, in 1975, with about a 2% divergence from A. From the very point I turn my machine off on B, I create a new world line just because I'm there. That line can be described as C and started when I got to B. I am now doing my mission on line C in 1975 when I discover a very good reason to go forward on C and see what happened. I turn my machine on and go forward on C to the year 2000, or 1998. When I turn it off, I start another line called D. So from my perspective, here we are on line D in the year 2000. In order to go home to line A, I must turn my machine on and go back on D until I reach C, which in turn would take me back to B, which in turn takes me to the point before I arrived on B. Then I go forward from that point to arrive on B back to A. If all this isn't enough to get your head spinning, here are some issues we're dealing with in 2036. 1. Did your world line D exist at all before I got here from C? Personally, I don't see how it couldn't. 2. What happened at the end of the world line at the edge of the superuniverse? 3. If there are infinite world lines and infinite possibilities and an edge to the superuniverse, doesn't that mean occurring events on world lines are staggered as they reach the edge? Time could end at any moment without warning. Happy New Year, everyone. Q. I think you're taunting us with our ignorance about the Constitution. It would be nice to be able to remind everyone about their rights and responsibilities, but I'm not here to judge you. I am not capable of that, nor would I want that in return. As you know, my interest is in history and in the paradox of thought. I do find it interesting how important the Constitution became to the average U.S. citizen's life, if even for a short moment. Q. Young people should look forward to the future while older people don't see much of the future. I think it's pointless to worry about politics if we're all doomed. It saddens me that you do not realize your true worth as a keeper of information and experience. Perhaps the end that we fear will open your eyes to your true value as an individual. Young people need wisdom. The captain of the ship knows where the lifeboats are. Q. In order for CERN to make a black hole, they would have to travel faster than light. I'm pretty sure they have a number of experiments going on at some time at CERN. The one I'm referring to involves very high energies using protons. From my historical perspective on my world line, I do recall the issue was a point of contention about 18 months or so ago. There were some scientists who thought the experiments were too dangerous to try. The time travel I refer to does not require faster than light travel, and due to multiple world realities, paradoxes do not occur. Natural time machines do exist. I fear our conversation is in danger of turning to conflict due to an effect that is quite common on these boards. I realize what I'm saying is quite hard to swallow, and it causes debate, whether serious or entertaining. It is even more difficult when you come into the middle of a conversation or a series of questions that are a few weeks old. Your points are all quite valid, and I have discussed them at length on this and other boards for quite a while. I do not wish to antagonize you. However, we both know the Tipler cylinder is only a thought experiment to explain the very real physics behind Kerr black holes. As to your other comments, again, they are all true as defined by the limits of space-like trips or single world lines. It does not account for travel between world lines. I have never claimed to be a physicist or an expert on what the CERN laboratory is doing at any given moment, so I feel it pointless to argue about what they may be doing in the future or what breakthroughs they will or might have. My comment about the CERN labs are in the reference to the particle accelerators in general and other questions that have come up in the past. The major physics breakthroughs for controlling gravity distortion does happen at CERN in your future. Heck, we haven't even touched on Z-field compression yet. I suppose I could say that I was the one who traveled in time and convinced them to change their experiments, but even I would have a hard time believing that one, and I do not wish to insult your intelligence. Thank you for trying to answer these questions from December 30th, 2000, but I really do not expect that anyone can. I thought I would share with you things we wonder about. Your logic about me is quite correct, but again I must state that I am not trying to get you or anyone else to believe or buy anything. As far as evidence goes, I have decided to try an experiment with you that may be more convincing. It involves the travel of information at faster than light. In fact, I have dropped at least 3 little gems like this no one has even picked up on. You said you are confused by the 5100 story. I will explain further. In 2036, it was discovered, or at least known after testing, that the 5100 computer was capable of reading and changing all the legacy code written by IBM before the release of that system and still be able to create new code in APL and BASIC. This is the reason we needed it in 2036. However, IBM never published that information because it would have probably destroyed a large part of their business infrastructure in the early 70s. In fact, I would bet the engineers were probably told to keep their mouths shut. Therefore, if I were not here now telling you this, the information would not be discovered for another 36 years. Yes, I would bet there is someone out there who can do the research and discover that I am telling the truth. There must be an old IBM engineer out there someplace that worked on the 5100. They just might not have ever asked if I hadn't pointed it out. Part 3. John Teeter. January 3rd, 2001. I've been reading the last few postings with a bit of confusion. I see there is controversy over my story that is causing some people to ask themselves if they believe it or not. For quite a while, I have been stating that not only do I not expect anyone to believe me, it's irrelevant and, in my opinion, quite dangerous. Belief implies you accept what I say is true and real. Over the internet, this is impossible. In fact, I have stated before, there are many people in 2036 who do not believe in time travel. I also think that unwavering belief is dangerous. One very disturbing thing that I have noticed about your society is your blind acceptance of what you are told. Do you really think the news industry doesn't have an agenda? Do you really think those hamburgers you stuff into your body are safe? Do you really think your government is telling you the truth? What proof do you have of any of that? What I want you to do is open your eyes to the events around you that have nothing to do with me. Some of you have been reading about the war in 2015 and the breakthroughs in particle physics that would be coming soon. Doesn't the CIA report on 2015 and news on Z-field compression at least support what I've been saying a little bit? I just saw another news story today about the Russians moving nuclear weapons into the Balkans to thwart future expansion by NATO. I also haven't heard anyone take me up on my information experiment on the IBM 5100 or check out the information I've given you about the Unix failure in 2038. With all due respect, I find it hard to take some of you seriously. January 5th, 2001. In 2036, community life is a bit different. People are valued and judged based on their contribution and worth. Work is organized around the family, and the value of that work is assessed inside of the community. Most communities range in size from 1,000 to 4,000 people. If a family wanted to move from one community to another, or if a son or daughter wanted to move to another community, they must apply and be interviewed by the Community Leadership Council. During this process, the family or individual is evaluated as to whether or not the work or skill they have is required or necessary to that individual community. Once accepted, the family or individual is expected to support the community. If they don't, the community stops supporting them, and they either change their attitude or move away from the community. The family work we did was picking, sorting, and shipping oranges by sailboat up and down the coast of Florida. We were expected to produce a certain amount for the community and a certain amount for other communities as agreed to by our CLC. In exchange, we received power, water, a certain amount of food, and other necessities that were produced inside our community. I see this message board as a small community, and I have no other way to value the contributions of others on it other than what my past experiences tell me. I have tried to answer as many questions as I can without being annoying, repetitive, or inappropriate, and for some, entertaining. Under these conditions, I have decided to seek guidance from you, the other members of this community, as to whether or not my postings are of any value. If they are getting distracting or repetitive, I will stop and continue to enjoy reading your thoughts and ideas. Q. Who receives the Nobel Prize for time travel? Since you claim no world lines are the same, this information could not hurt anything. There are a great many people involved with the discovery of time travel. Just as I will not give stock tips, I will not divulge their names, as that would have an impact on their lives now. Q. Why not give us technical information that's discovered in a year or so, anyway? If I had that information and published it, I'm not so sure it would have an impact. Again, we get back to the same question. If you were a time traveler, what would you do to establish your credibility? Q. Have any other time travelers visited your future? No, I'm not aware of any time travelers visiting my world line in 2036. However, that does not mean it can't or isn't happening. Also, the possible number of world lines a time traveler might arrive at would place the chances of them hitting any particular one at a very long odds. Q. What happens to a particular person? Am I involved in time travel? What are the resistance? I have no idea what happens to you in your future. There was a resistance on my world line, but their goal was to maintain power and control over other people. We killed most of them by 2020. How big is the IBM 5100? I would say it's about 20 inches long, 10 inches high, and 30 inches wide. Q. Are there still books in 2036? Yes, books are still published. Q. Are there restrictions to what you can do with the time machine? The displacement machine is not mine, but I am free to make certain decisions based on the experiences and information I gather from each world line. I am expected back, but from their perspective, I will only have been gone for a split second. January 6th, 2001. Q. What is the progress with string theory? In 2036, string theory still dominates physics due to its continued effect of encompassing other physical properties from unrelated fields. A great deal of theoretical mathematics behind time travel was discovered by testing various ideas in string theory and eliminating the anomalies. As I recall, it was this original work that led to the final proof that 6 dimensions do indeed curl up to give us our observable universe. This in turn supported more of the theoretical math behind time travel. It's ironic that the beauty of string theory gives future engineers the confidence to create the distortion unit even though the final proof is still unknown. You're a physics student. Have you ever heard the Princeton String Quartet play? January 9th, 2001. Q. Q. Why do you give us more detailed information about the future so we won't be so skeptical? I think skepticism is a good thing and no one should lose it. Q. Why don't you accept my challenge? I'm not sure what challenge you are referring to. If you mean the live chat, I have no problem with that. I do that quite often on other boards. However, I fear I have very few bread and circuses left, and I fear I am becoming quite boring. Also, I am not sure I fully understand the nature of your challenge. Q. You could still give us details about the future that would add to your credibility. Again, I do not seek to add to my credibility. There is no point to it. Actually, by providing information that was useful, I would be adding to your collective fear that I am real. In that case, the cycle we are in concerning truth only spirals out of control and gets worse. Q. Can you name the 5 presidents you have in your time? Over the past few postings, I have tried to describe the limits of what I will talk about and why. 1. I will not disclose any information that will cause someone to personally gain by its knowledge. This means no stock or sports tips. 2. I will not disclose any detailed information that will allow someone to avoid death by probability. This means no earthquake or bombing information. 3. I will not disclose any information that may compromise any future actions by individual people or threaten their family and well-being. On my world line, we are no longer afraid of the NWO. Are you afraid of Nazis? The reason the job of president was split into an office of 5 has 4 main reasons. With 5 presidents, foreign policy is more consistent. Power shifting between parties has less of an impact on the overall government. Individual strengths between presidents adds to the strength of the office, as one president is elected for each major area in the United States. Q. What is the extent of presidential power in 2036? The office of president is far more diluted and decentralized than it is here. The power of the national government are more defined and reside more in the county and state level. Q. Do you like the new government in 2036 compared to the current one? I think the new government is good. However, since the concept of nationally subsidized welfare is gone, most people here may not appreciate it. Q. What is the new U.S. Capitol? The new U.S. Capitol is in Omaha, Nebraska. Q. How do the 5 presidents take power? The voting for individual candidates is on a rotating schedule. Q. What are the other time travelers' destinations and missions? I am not aware of the details of other missions. Of the 7, 3 had already left before I did. I suspect they are on similar missions. Q. Are any other time travelers on our current world line? No, the chances of that are very slim. Q. Are you in contact with other time travelers? No, although I would suspect that it's not impossible. I have no idea how you would do that. Q. Is it possible to send a message through time? No, not unless the information physically travels with the person. I apologize for being unable to respond faster. I looked back and I couldn't find any unanswered questions, but I may be mistaken. Q. Forum member condemns time travel and time travelers as evil. You seem to have a great deal of anger directed at me. If you knew where I was and how to get the distortion unit, what would you do? What judgment and punishment should be passed upon me? On this and many other discussion boards are people who are generally interested in and hoping to experience or discover time travel. What punishment would you apply to them if they succeed? I see that you claim to have had time travel experience. What punishment do you deserve? When time travel was discovered, there were many people who were against its development. However, once the true nature of time was realized, that resistance faded. Even if one world line was able to ban, kill, and stop all time travel, it will continue on another. However, the corollary is also true. Take heart. On some world line you have succeeded, and all time travelers are dead by the hands of your followers, and thinking or talking about it is a crime. Perhaps we should all agree what we mean when we use the phrase time travel. We are all moving forward in time just by existing, and the effects of acceleration and gravity do slow time down for the observer, so the rest of the world seems to speed up around them. If we call this natural time travel, or time-like trips on a single world line, then perhaps it's really controlled time travel that you are after, which are space-like trips on a single world line or traveling to alternative world lines. January 10th, 2001. With that, it may then be useful to separate the concepts of controlled time travel into theory and practice. In theory, time travel was taken seriously by mainstream science when it was discovered that Einstein's equations do indeed support the possibility of controlled time travel under special relativity. Since special relativity, under its current limitations of course, has been proved useful and accurate in predicting other physical phenomenon, it is widely believed that controlled time travel is also possible. Nearly all of the solutions that allow time travel in special relativity also have the annoying problem of crushing the time traveler in a wake of radiation and gravity. In my experience, there is only one safe way to obtain controlled time travel, and that involves the safe properties of a Kerr singularity or black hole. However, I do not discount the possibility of other methods. I'm just not sure I would bet my life on them without any math to back them up. Q. How is it possible to measure divergence between world lines? The measurement for world line divergence is an observation variable isolated to the distortion unit. An effective analogy would be a gravity radar. The unit sensor takes a snapshot of the local gravity around the unit before a flight. During travel, this baseline is periodically checked to make sure there are no major changes in the environment that would cause a catastrophic mass failure. A brick wall appearing from nowhere. The percentage of EGL divergence from one world line to another is a calculated guess by the three computers that control the unit based on its starting point. It is useless in describing characteristics of individual world lines. There is a bit of folklore about the first distortion driver who reaches a destination with a zero divergence. This would mean he had traveled on a space-like trip to their own world line of origin. This paradox is quite possible, although highly unlikely. I wonder if anyone out there can take current string theory and make that one work on paper. Q. You said 6 dimensions. The current string theory suggests that there should be at least 7. I may be mistaken, but I thought it was pretty well established now that N-10 was on track. January 11th, 2001. I must admit, forum name, you have succeeded in confusing me. The more I read your postings, the more I question my understanding and local use of social interaction, courtesy, and logic. However, I also believe that all viewpoints have some inherent value, even if it's not apparent. Q. Why won't you answer my last post? I looked at your last posting and didn't see any questions. However, I now realize that I may be mistaken in assuming much of what you wrote was rhetorical. It may be helpful if you add some indication that you are asking a question. Q. If you're from the future, then you should know what happens to personal names. Am I involved in time travel? This is the only question I found from your posting that you could be referring to. Again, I have no knowledge of you in any possible future, nor would I comment on it if I did. As far as the photograph of me in a uniform, I am not sure what that would prove, even if I had one. Q. If you speak anymore, I will discredit your claims of being a time traveler. I do not seek credit for anything. The most I can hope for is to be at least interesting and engaging. January 15th, 2001. In the post that follows, I've tried to answer the latest questions directed at me, but I'm hoping you may be able to add some insights into something I've noticed. In our attempt to communicate here, some of the comments on this board have become increasingly hostile and negative. I see the same interaction when I watch news interview programs. The guise of productive interaction and communication is thwarted by illogical verbal attacks and misdirection. I understand why the news does it. They are trying to hold an audience by generating conflict. For a while, I thought that was the goal here too, but it appears that anger and conflict is being created on this site to cause genuine harm and pain. It's hard for me to believe that this is being done on purpose. So I have concluded I simply do not understand some hidden element of your collective social interaction. On the other hand, if it's being done for no reason, I would understand a little bit better how people in this time could accomplish so much and yet be so vulnerable to their emotions and fears. I think it was Thomas Jefferson who believed that the only way to sway opinion was through calm, respectful, intelligent conversation. Whether I'm a time traveler or not, I suppose there are numerous ways to view my story. By the nature of the communication medium, I believe it's impossible to prove. Therefore, it's impossible to believe. I agree that conversation spurs ideas. If I'm not a time traveler, then perhaps the seemingly disjointed statements I make will actually create the idea in one of you that leads to real time travel. Q. What is a world line? Individual world lines represent the limits and paths physical objects take through space-time under the laws of special relativity. They can be shown graphically on an XY graph, with X representing distance in space and Y representing passing of time. In time travel talk, world lines are used as a way to describe and separate the experiences of a time traveler because laws of special relativity appear to break down and can't be defined on a single world line. World lines has also become synonymous with alternative universe and/or timeline. Q. You've admitted to taking things back with you. Do you pay for those items? I pay for these items with money. Personally, I believe stealing is wrong. Q. Can you just take whatever you wanted back with you? There are mass limits to what can be taken back. Q. Are you tested before becoming a time traveler? What makes a good time traveler? Yes, there are numerous psychological tests. I was chosen based on my educational background and military service. The training lasted about 2 years. There is a great deal of physical training to counter the effects of distortion. They were also looking for drivers who had a fair amount of self-sufficiency and an ability to function under extreme isolation and confinement. Q. What do you look for when choosing someone for a mission? Depending on the mission, time travelers are usually chosen based on their ability to gain the cooperation of someone related to the goal on the target world line. In my case, my grandfather was directly involved with the building and programming of the 5100. Q. If a time traveler is evil and commits murder, is there any way they can be recalled? There is a difference of philosophy between us that should be clarified. Since I believe that all possible outcomes and events are possible, probable, and certain, it is impossible to assign goodness or badness to a person or situation. On some other world line, I am an insane time traveler causing destruction and death, while U chases me with his... Q. If a time traveler is evil and commits murder, is there any way they can be recalled? There is a difference of philosophy between us that should be clarified. Since I believe that all possible outcomes and events are possible, probable, and certain, it is impossible to assign goodness or badness to a person or situation. On some other world line, I am an insane time traveler causing destruction and death, while, name a forum member who confronted John on a regular basis, chases me with his band of devoted followers. However, on this one, I am not. Since both events are certain, their value is neutral. You can only assign goodness and badness to the events and experiences you have direct control over or witness. Only actions are good and bad, not people or things. I suppose if I was a psychotic killer, I could accomplish my mission, avoid capture, and still return to my world line of origin without penalty. There would be no way for them to know what happened. However, I believe that action is wrong and I would be accountable to my God. Q. How do you know our world line and yours follow the same path? This world line and my own are almost exactly alike. Thank you for considering the problem of my returning home. You are correct. Getting back to the world line of origin is easier than picking an exact destination on a different world line. Q. Does the mini black hole that powers your time machine physically reduce the size of objects during operation? Actually, there are two singularities in the unit. The gravity field is manipulated by three factors that affect it in distinct ways. Adding electric charge to the singularities increases the diameter of the inner event horizons. Adding mass to the singularities increases the area of gravitational influence around the singularities. Rotating and positioning the polar axis of the singularities affects and alters the gravity sinusoid. The effects of the gravity produced by the unit do not have enough time to significantly alter physical objects within a reasonable distance from the outside of the sinusoid. No, things do not get smaller. Q. If the electron injection system changes the shape of the field, would that not force the unit to accelerate through space? There is no relative movement in space due to three main factors. Large kinetic energy inducing effects of the gravity field are compensated for by the interaction of the singularities. The observed path of the traveler is obtained by changing the gravity, not by moving the vehicle. The black hole comes to you. Q. Define time. To me, time has two definitions. I see time as a mathematical component of a 10-dimensional superuniverse. It is a variable I use to define my location and existence. I also see time as a metaphysical compromise our senses use to define the area of collective existence God has placed us in. When I can measure and sense time, I know I am not with God. January 16th, 2001. Q. I know you have a hidden agenda. You have not made clear your motives and are only giving us very little proof. Why are you holding back? Rest assured, there is nothing I have planned in my hidden agenda that will make anyone's life any worse than it already might be. Q. Do you do a lot of work in the background of our society? Admit it. I plan to leave soon. There is nothing I can do here that will affect my home. My goals are based on the love I have for my family. Actually, my interest in the past is a result of going through piles of half-burned books and magazines left over from a war started by people you share this world with right now. On that note, perhaps it's more interesting to consider what I won't be doing to try and stop that war. Q. Do you believe in God? Which one? Do you think ends justify the means? Don't you have people regulating time travel? How many gods are there? I believe in just one. What are your suggestions for regulating time? Perhaps a list of your time rights would be something to spark conversation on the board. Q. You are a cheater. Why can't you time fend for yourself? You take the solution from us and threaten to change billions of lives here. Why don't you care about that? I'm just guessing that cheater of life is not a compliment. I can't think of a reason why my actions would be immoral and someone else's would not. You suggest I'm capable of changing lives. I suggest that I'm no more capable of that than you are. I'm just not so sure you recognize your own potential. You don't need a time machine to save or destroy people. If there was another person doing the exact same thing I was, but they didn't have a time machine, would they be putting billions of lives at stake and suffer your judgment? Q. Is there any such thing as wrong for you? Yes. I believe in wrong and right. I judge my actions based on God's law. It is wrong for me to murder. Yes, it is. It is wrong for me to teach someone how to defend himself and they commit murder. No, I am not their keeper. Since I am leaving, I will be incapable of causing any harm. But what damage will you do with anything I have said? January 17th, 2001. In the future, sociologists spend a great deal of time discussing the collective mentality before the war that led to the demise of Homo materia. Many of them point to an experiment that was done in the 1970s or 1980s. The experiment isolated various sizes of rat populations in varying sizes with varying foods and cleaning schedules. It was discovered that no matter what, there was a certain ratio of rats to space that once overtaken by population would always lead to aggressive and destructive behavior in the rats until enough of them had died or been killed to get back under the ratio. This was true even when the rats were given plenty of food and had their cage cleaned every day. Besides the occasional school or office shooting and violent video game, I can't help but think about that experiment every time I see someone stranded on the highway or walking on the side of the road carrying an empty gas can. I ask my parents why we don't stop and help, and they tell me the possible consequences of helping someone they don't know. I would respond by pointing out that it's our duty to help, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because we can never know that person's true worth and the risk of losing them is too great. I didn't fully understand their stubbornness until I saw a news story about a doctor who was sued for applying emergency first aid to an accident victim who died. I believe your society is biologically geared for self-destruction. However, I feel strongly that does not accuse me for my responsibilities as a temporary member of this community. Although, name of poster on forum, is a bit quirky and eccentric, he does belong to us. Although he can be aggravating, I can't help but feel protective of him. As I'm sure most of us believe, under all of his posts, he has some interesting things to say. When I first read one of his postings, I shook my head and questioned my own understanding of the English language. If it's done on purpose, it is quite effective. January 26, 2001. Greetings, everyone. I've been away for a while, so I apologize for not getting back to these questions sooner. Q. Why are you interested in the Constitution? After the war, the United States had split into 5 separate regions based on the various factors and military objectives they each had. There was a great deal of anger directed toward the federal government, and a revival of states' rights was becoming paramount. However, in their attempt to create an economic form of government, the political and military leaders decided to hold one last constitutional Congress in order to present a psychological cohesion with the old system. During this Congress, the leaders discovered and decided that coming up with a new and better form of government was nearly impossible. The original Constitution itself was not the problem. It was the ignorance of the people that lived under it. Q. Don't you like your new Constitution? From my viewpoint, it's very effective. I am a very strong believer in the rights of local and state governments. Q. When are you leaving? There are certain windows I must wait for in order to leave. There will be 2 this year. The first one opens this spring. Q. Is it possible for you to return to this time once you leave? Not with the machine I have now. Q. If we all had time machines, will we end up destroying the rest of world lines? Since everything is already happening and possible on different world lines, the answer is yes and no. Q. You appear to be a libertarian who stresses getting back to basics. You also seem to be a gun rights activist. I suppose that's a fair assessment. I would call myself more of a centrist. Although I understand the gun rights issue here, I cannot relate to it at all at this common point of argument with my mother. I keep saying her tune will change in about 10 years, and she'll be cleaning shotguns in her sleep, but it doesn't help. If it makes you feel any better, I never shot anybody who wasn't trying to kill me. Q. Since we're not very smart, can you help us solve the technical problems of time travel? When you say us, what do you mean? Do you mean you? Where would you go if you had my machine? How do you think the rest of the world would react to the U.S. having a time machine and they didn't? Q. You stated you went back in time from 2036 to 1975 with a near 2% divergence. You also said that a zero divergence is a myth or technologically improbable. Yes, a ZD is thought to be impossible. However, consider that an exact entry point may not be necessary to get home. The important factor is the path, not the destination. Under multiple world theory, there are an infinite number of homes that I could return to that don't have me there. The divergence for that window is somewhere near 0.0002377%. Q. Are parallel universes created by events in our own world line? Parallel universes exist independently of each other and only interact to avoid the collapse of the wave function for any given particle or event that you are looking at. I like to imagine it as a series of parallel lines crossing by a wavy line. Each point on the wavy line where a straight line crosses, it represents an alternative outcome. The multiple U's on each world line record a different result from the activity of the particle. Q. Multiple world theory and parallel universes have never been proven. It exists as a way to explain findings in quantum mechanics. Just because people talk about it doesn't mean it's real. I agree with you that an explanation doesn't make it so. However, you can build a model to describe physical behavior. Even if the model is not complete, its truth can be measured by how well it predicts the behavior it describes. Q. Where did the idea of the multiverse come from? Where is the evidence of its existence? I believe the closest non-relevant evidence for multiple universes right now comes from the physics, derived from special relativity, of rotating Kerr black holes. If you examine a typical Penrose map, science agrees that you can travel to other universes through these cosmic oddities. They can't be different places in your own universe or world line because you would have to violate the speed of light limit to get there. Since the existence of multiple universes is a reality from my viewpoint, please allow me to disclose an idea we toss around a bit in 2036. Since all possibilities, outcomes, and events are occurring and existing simultaneously, it would mean there are multiple universes out there where you are living a day behind and a day ahead of the you on this universe. There are some who believe that memory is some sort of information transfer or communication with the yous in the past across world lines or universes. Although this is seemingly quite ridiculous, if you think that could be true, then physics tells us that the same information transfer from our future selves on other world lines is not only possible, but also certain. Could it be that fantasy or what-if scenarios are actually future memory from an alternative us on a future world line? According to physics, There is no reason why this cannot be true. Q. Your mission to go back in time seems rather pointless, since you stated earlier there is no way to get back to your exact starting point. The reality of infinite possibilities is rather difficult to get a grip on, and if it were not for the math, I would delegate it to the realm of religion. I like to think of it as standing in a room with mirrors on all the walls. I can look to my right and left and see many me's all doing the exact same thing. If we all took a step to our right and passed through a dimensional doorway to the next mirrored room, it would be very difficult to tell if anything has changed. In that sense, there are an infinite number of world lines waiting for me to return with the computer. If I can get to one of them, I've had completed my mission. Q. Another time traveler that looks like you could arrive on your world line of origin with another IBM computer and no one would know the difference. Bingo. Seems like something they would do a lot of psychological testing for before they send us off. January 28th, 2001. Q. You never showed us a picture of your uniform. Actually, there are numerous places I have posted pictures. I believe the links are still on the board. Q. Why haven't you commented on not caring about your original world line? I'm not sure what you're asking. I think those statements speak for themselves and your interpretation of them may be unique. One of the reasons I like the board is because the questions are more thought out. The people seem to be a bit smarter than normal, and I've not continually bombarded with questions about stock tips. I will admit that on a conceptual level, you are picking it up much faster than I did. Q. If you leave your world line, your friends and family members will never see you again. That seems like a very immoral thing to do. I'm not sure what you think it would be immoral. Don't soldiers today go on duties that they may not return from? It depends on how you define what the real me is. If you consider the mirror example again as all of the me's step one room to the right, the family and friends in that room, and the time traveler for that matter, would not be able to tell the difference. The probability of us noticing a difference is based on the divergence of the trip. If all events and outcomes are certain, there are world lines where I do return from every world line I don't. All the moral events would then balance out to zero. Again, it's hard to judge good and bad outcomes, only good and bad decisions. Q. What's the point of fixing something in world line if there's an infinite number of world lines where the problem doesn't exist? Our actions and decisions are based on the knowledge we have in our own world line. Yes, the bell-shaped curve is a useful tool, but if we are capable of change for the better, then we feel we should at least try. Even if I don't return to my exact world line, a similar me probably will. Besides, I just look at it as helping a world line where their time traveling me didn't show up, but I did. Q. Earlier you said the people on your world line would only experience your being away for a second. How can this be true if you never return to that world line? Again, I refer to the mirror example. Q. It seems impossible that another you would return to the world line you originally came from. I'm not sure I said another time traveler will return. I think I said they could return. The location gravity map I have on my path getting here could be duplicated with a fairly high degree of accuracy. It's just that my machine was not designed to do that. I think it's a mistake to rely on the concept of the impossible when dealing with the reality of multiple worlds. Keep in mind there are an infinite number of yous on infinite world lines having completely different experiences with me. Q. You stated that returning to your world line of origin is impossible. My initial flight was from 2036 to 1975, 61 years. I then went from 1975 to 2000, 25 years. Later this year, one of two favorable windows will open and I will return to my 2036, 35 years. I am here now for personal reasons. The webpage is not mine. I have been speaking online for about 3 months, and the page is a collection of the various documents and pictures I have sent to other individuals. Also, I realize there is no way for anyone to believe me with absolute certainty, so I hope I'm at least entertaining. You may be interested to know that even in 2036, there are a large number of people who don't believe in time travel. Are you sure the world is round? January 29th, 2001. Please keep in mind the website is not mine, and I apologize for the poor quality of the files. The photo you saw was taken by me with a Polaroid camera manufactured here. The other documents were duplicated by placing a book onto a copy machine at a packaging and shipping store and then scanning and saving them. As for the printing technology in 2036, you may be surprised at how many people use typewriters. However, I agree the documents were probably not created that way. I, too, am very anxious to hear your thoughts and questions on time travel, gravity displacement, and any comments on the Everett Wheeler Graham model. Although the documents posted were printed from a computer printer, it is really that hard to believe that the manual typing is just a bit more common in 30 years? After the war, many things like manual printing machines, bicycles, sailboats, and hand tools were valued a great deal. I have noticed more people in California are installing wood-burning stoves. I realize my claims are a bit ridiculous, but my intent is not really to be believed. However, if I had an opportunity to talk to a time traveler, I might ask questions like, how exactly does a singularity sensor measure the expansion of the inner event horizon? Or why does the reality of multiple worlds support the religious dogma that there are no good or bad people, just good and bad decisions? Or what were the political motivations that changed the U.S. Constitution? In my experience, when it becomes necessary to convince someone what I do for a living, the only way to do that is to be related to them. Everything else is immediately written off as a parlor trick, even if they're standing in front of a cooling distortion unit and I show them a dollar bill from the year 2029. In the last few months, I have had numerous extended conversations online, and there are quite a few things I've said which can easily be checked but haven't. I get no pleasure out of being right when it comes to CJD disease, war in the Middle East, or suffering people in faraway lands. There's nothing like the look on someone's face when you tell them 100,000 people will be dead tomorrow. In my travels, I have discovered that most people really don't want to know about the future because it's different than what they want. It ticks them off. Actually, I don't blame them. The means by which I travel in time is very physical. I require a machine to do it. It weighs about 500 pounds and gets quite hot. I do not own it, and I did not build it. Within limits, I will be happy to discuss how it works and how future science thinks time works. No, we have not completed string theory yet, but n to the negative 10 seems to work pretty well. As far as the future goes, your world line is about 2.5% different than mine. This is roughly cumulative measurement based on my arrival in 1975. As far as I can tell right now, you are heading towards the same events I would call my history in 2036. However, the very nature of time travel states that every world line is unique, and you are very much in control of what you do and how you get there. Heck, the fact that I'm here makes it different from mine. I have nothing to sell, and there is nothing I want anyone to do. For all you other time travelers out there, I have no tests for you, and I would enjoy discussing your feelings and experiences after the war. To everyone else, while I'm here, I am very interested in your philosophy, religious outlooks, and speculations on technology. Q. Are the Olympics still played in the future? As a result of the many conflicts, no, there were no official Olympics after 2004. However, it appears they may be revived in 2040. Q. Why wouldn't it be possible to use a recording to go back to your original starting point without any divergence at all? Perhaps it's better to say it's so highly improbable as to be considered impossible. A good example is the concept of trying to get closer to something by cutting the distance in half for every step you take. Since the computer is basically making calculations from an imperfect model of reality, there are no absolutes. I also believe there is a theory that states you would have to violate the speed of light limit to have a perfect ZD. Q. Why are there only 2 windows of opportunity for you to go back? Does this have anything to do with the weather? The weather isn't a factor as much as gravitational tidal forces at the point of arrival. Q. I disapprove of war because I think it's immoral. What do you think? I disapprove of murder. Man as a species is incapable of changing his nature through will alone, and war is a tool of biology. The ability for war sleeps in each one of us, and we must decide what we do before the beast awakens. As for morality, again, I point to the universal balance of good and evil. For every world line where there is peace, there is a world line that has destroyed itself. Q. What's the use of bringing back the computer to a slightly different world line since you know there are just as many world lines in which no one returns to bring back the computer? The decisions and actions we take as individuals can only help those who we have direct interaction with. I believe it is wrong to be capable of helping and do nothing. My struggle is in the irony that if everyone just did nothing on every world line, there would be no action, and thus no immorality or evil, and no good either. Q. I'm very interested in your comments on the greed of humanity. Please feel free to ask anything you like. Q. Can you record a voice message for us before you leave? Yes, I am considering trying to videotape my departure and having my parents post it after I leave. That should keep you all busy for a while. Q. What sort of future do you imagine after 2036? Will we colonize the solar system? Keep in mind that not all humans were destroyed, but we were all affected. There is an effort going into colonizing space because it's believed that the problems of overpopulation were a large cause of the war. Personally, my generation sees itself as having a duty to try and repair the mess our fathers handed to us. When we were young, most of us had a small taste of the world you live in now, and our only dream is to clean it up and give it back to those still able to have children. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like to approach the Wright brothers in 1910 before their first flight and make the suggestion that in a mere 30 years, man would be on the brink of flying through the air at the speed of sound. What tools would I be able to show them that would convince them? Would a picture of a jet airplane do it? Would complicated math and physics equations do it? Would it take a ride? Perhaps there will be a way to share the photos again, but I don't expect it would convince anyone. I would only hope they would spark conversation and make the reality of time travel a little more personal. Although I have no personal experience with non-mechanical time travel, I cannot discount it. Physics has a way of making the impossible a reality. I'm not here to study anyone. My objective was in 1975, and the reason I'm here now is my family. I find my preconceptions of what I would encounter interesting. Being exposed to a society through its art, music, and advertising is one thing, and experiencing it is another. I'm not sure the physics of time travel is really that hard to grasp. Most of the working theory has been around on a large scale since 1970, and the technical breakthroughs are happening on your world line right now. Technology is not gone in 2036, nor is it the private domain of government leaders. Computer printers just didn't work very well on 12 volts, and many people just got used to doing things the old way. After the war, the main problem was distribution. Can anyone tell me how many companies in the United States still manufacture bicycle tires today? Anyone who still has a bike in 2008 will find out. January 31st, 2001. I'm not aware of any specific predictions I made, or perhaps we do not agree on the definition. What anyone chooses to do based on something I might say will not affect me in the least. My goal is not to be believed, and I submit that your life would not be any better and perhaps worse if you did believe me. You place tests before me that I must pass. Why? What do I have to gain by passing them? The fact is there is nothing I can say or show you or let you drop hydrochloric acid on that will make you believe me, and I really don't want that. It would be nice to discuss your views on religion, politics, physics, and the mechanical requirements of time travel. But in order to engage in those types of conversations, I must apparently tell you who wins the hockey game next week. I'm just guessing that if I were to write out the 10 lines for Fermat's final proof, you wouldn't be very impressed either. 1. Industrialized mass production does not produce the uncountable tonnage of useless consumer items so gleefully absorbed by your society. I would estimate there are about 10 units like mine, the C204, and 20 large units, C206. The main difference is the sensitivity and number of main cesium clocks. I would estimate that some sort of public time travel will be common around 2045. 2. I'm not aware of any other time travelers here now, but if they are here, I'm sure they're poring over sports history books so they can go back in time another week and start a friendly conversation on the web. 3. The mad cow story here is yet to begin, but don't worry. The fruited gelatin desserts are safe. 4. I'm glad to see it so easy for you to dismiss the Middle East. Yes, I suppose it is a no-brainer, but pretty soon it will be a no armor and a no legger. Ethics is an excellent topic of discussion, and I hope we move past the collective insistence of applying everything to this frame of reference. The distortion unit reaches its target destination by using very sensitive gravity sensors and atomic clocks. The basic unit of calculation is the second. So yes, in a sense, you do dial in on a date, and the computer system controls the distortion field. At maximum power, the unit I have is capable of traveling about 10 years an hour. Unfortunately, time travel is not an exact science. There is inherent error and chaos in the computer's ability to make accurate calculations. Based on the current technology of the clocks and sensors, distortion units are only accurate to about 60 years or so. So no, in 2036, we aren't able to travel back 1,000 years due to the error rates in the system. The divergence between the world line of origin and the target world line would be too great. If one were to try and travel back that far, history would look nothing like what you would expect. The unit has mass limitations, but the 204 is capable of transporting about 3 people and equipment. I don't think you would like 2036 very much. The 5100 has a very simple and unique feature that IBM did not account for and decided it was not in their best interest to advertise, which is hindsight, was not very smart. This accident feature was thus removed from any future desktop computers. In order to take advantage of this feature, the 5100 I have now required a couple of special tweaks that had to be done by one of the software engineers in 1975. Anyone who is familiar with this feature and was told to keep their mouth shut about it would be able to tell you what it is. I have noticed and gotten used to the act of verbal conflict as a cathartic entertainment. I don't totally understand it, but I take no offense by it either. Perhaps we could just arm wrestle someday and still be able to have a pleasant conversation. The year 2008 was a general date by which time everyone will realize the world they were living in was over. The Civil War in the United States will start in 2004. I would describe it as having a Waco-type event every month that steadily gets worse. The conflict will consume everyone in the U.S. by 2012 and end in 2015 with a very short World War III. The source of power for the C204 that allows it to distort and manipulate gravity comes from 2 microsingularities that were created, captured, and cleaned at a much larger and circular facility. The dual event horizons of each one and their mass is manipulated by injecting electrons on the surface of their respective ergospheres. The electricity comes from batteries. The breakthrough that will allow for this technology will occur within a year or so when CERN brings their large facility online. Perhaps it would have been clearer to state that the math has been around since 1970. I would urge you to examine the properties of Kerr black holes and Tipler cylinders. An actual working prototype was first tested in 2034. On my world line, time travel is not a public recreation, but we are all aware that it exists. You may be disappointed to know that the ability to manipulate gravity is not the technical challenge that has to be overcome. Miniaturizing the clocks and sensors, creating clever ways to vent X-rays, and creating a computer system dependable enough to calculate the changes required to the field were the main challenges. There are no missing pieces, just missing energy levels and a few very interesting subatomic particles.